Oh, there we go. Now it's going.
Okay. So, Parashat Vayechi. Vayechi Yaakov. Vayechi Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim, 17 shana, Vahi yimei Yaakov, shnei chayav, sheva shanim v'arba'im ma'at shana. Yaakov lived 147 years. And so the question is, Yaakov was about to die, and it says, the Parsha says, and Yaakov lived. So it's seemingly a contradiction in terms, and obviously the famous saying, Yaakov lo meis, Yaakov never really died. The famous saying of Chazal, Yaakov Avinu was in touch with this kind of like, this foreverness. Another one, Nachalat Yaakov li Mitzarim, which relates to what the Zohar says. Yaakov Avinu was in touch with this inheritance, or this kind of way of being that was without limits, with no limitations. It was infinite.
After his body died?
No, that's just in general. This whole concept of Yaakov Avinu. That's a whole other question. Again, Yaakov Avinu, obviously, he did die, but so the question is, when the saying Yaakov lo meis, so Yaakov didn't die, or isn't dead, I think has like a more spiritual connotation. But in terms of Nachalat Yaakov bli Mitzarim, that's a pasuk from somewhere, and it really has to do with the kind of the Jewish people and how we operate in the world, or in our existence. It has an aspect to it which is infinite. And I think on Shabbat, let's see if we say that as Kiddush in the daytime. But it's from I think it's from Isaiah, Yeshaya. Az tit'anag al Hashem v'irkabticha al matei aretz v'achalticha nachalat Yaakov avicha. You eat from the again the Nachalat Yaakov Avinu. Does it mention more about that? No, that's it. Yeah. So that's also Shabbat is considered to be the real kind of inheritance of Yaakov Avinu. The concept of Shabbat, that we take a day and we do engage in physical, but we don't do any creative work in the world. We don't get things done, or go to the store or whatever. Obviously the 39 malachot. So I think we talked about it a week or two ago that we close down certain aspects of ourselves only to open up others. And so on Shabbat we close down all these 39 aspects of ourselves, the 39 malachot. And it's all in order that it opens up this infinite aspect of ourselves, this aspect which has no limitations. And so that has to do with Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu is the first person to kind of come onto this in a way. Although we're talking Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, so and Leah, the Avot and Imahot, all were the first people to get in touch with God in a certain, very real way. But Yaakov, I think, is called Bechir Ava. The kind of he's it. Kind of everything kind of comes down to him. He's the one who has then the 12 tribes, and we all come from, we're called Bnei Yisrael. We're still Bnei Avram, we're still Bnei Yitzchak, but we're called Bnei Yisrael because he really kind of brought in this concept of being in touch with the infinite, this connection between, even his name Yaakov is Yud, I forgot where I saw it, maybe the Kedushat Levi says, Yud Akev. The Yud, which is the first letter of God's name, and the Akev, and the lowest, the heel. It also has to do with the hand and the foot. The hand and the foot are, interestingly enough, laid out similarly. Okay, where are we? Yeah, so Yaakov Avinu, anyway, Yud, the highest and the lowest. Again, Yaakov Avinu is connecting both. So Jews, we connect in our daily lives to something much higher than ourselves, and Shabbat kind of represents that. where we take the regular, the everyday, and we make it and we connect it to its source, connecting heaven and earth, or connecting spiritual and physical. So that all that was, I think, started, so to speak, by Yaakov. He really had that vision, and that's that whole thing where he falls asleep on on Har Bayit. It's kind of, in a way, it's kind of a funny story, he's sleeping in the holiest place in the world, and he's falling asleep, and and in his sleep he has this dream, and so I think that the way the Rebbe's all, at least somehow, it's in one way interpreted, is he has this, in his sleep, even in those things which are sleeping, which are not spiritually awake, even those things which are physical, you can have spirit. It is the deepest spirituality. You can have the deepest revelation, the deepest vision of God, even while you're doing physical things. And that's the very concept of Yaakov Avinu. And before that, prior to that, the preparation for that was Yaakov Avinu was learning. So the learning Torah is what prepares you and allows you access to this deep spirituality that's in everyday life. And that's kind of epitomized in Shabbat, in keeping Shabbat. With every day, especially in today's world, it's like we lose track of just kind of regular stuff, sitting down and talking, with someone, or things. We kind of lose track of it. Even the kind of basic, simple ways of doing stuff. So that's it. Yeah, it's interesting though. Shabbat is even more important now. Hello.
Hi.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thanks for
Where would
coming.
you sit? Anywhere. Anywhere is good. You're the operator. What? Oh, operator?
We were just talking about the whole concept of Yaakov Avinu in terms of morning.
Hi, sorry for running late.
No, it's good. Thanks for coming. There's the whole concept of Yaakov Avinu. We're talking about how this concept of making the everyday holy, or connecting the everyday with that which is holy, and that which is high, that which is beyond us. And so we're, like Shabbat. So this is this again. So Yaakov Avinu represents almost this infinite, not what Yaakov Limitzarim. Yaakov represents this infinite or the connection to the infinite world. He's to the infinite God, really. And so you might think again, can be that when you think of someone who's connected to the infinite, you think of maybe, I don't know, a very wise person sitting on a mountaintop somewhere, and that may be also, but in our tradition, it's not that way. The more the person is connected with the infinite, actually the more they're doing in the world, the more they're able to kind of go in the world and affect the world that they encounter. And so it's and bring together different worlds, and the most different would be the physical and spiritual. I just flashed on this story of Reb Shlomo. Somehow he was at one of these ecumenical conferences. He would always go. There were these there are these conferences where they have different leaders of world religions, and somehow they would all, thankfully, they would always find him and invite him to come. There's all sorts of stories about it. It'd be a whole book, just stories of Reb Shlomo, ecumenical conferences. And I remember one time he was, I don't remember what the situation was, but there was some big argument, of course, ensued. And so one of the Hindu masters who was there came to Reb Shlomo and said, you have to make peace. You have to bring these people together. And Reb Shlomo said, why me? I feel like that was always happening to him. Probably, whatever the problem was, if he was there, someone was always asking him to try to come fix it. Which, in retrospect, actually was probably the best idea. But so he said, well, why me? And he said, well, this Hindu master said, well, he said, that's what you choose. That's your specialty. Is you're able to actually make real peace. You can actually bring very disparate views together. So I don't remember the exact story, but I remember the punchline, which is typical actually with me. I seem to remember the punchline of stories more than the story. Anyway, so that's the kind of Yaakov Avinu is able to, again, and that's just in terms of human beings. Yaakov Avinu is able to bring together. The reason we have this ability to bring together, it seems kind of opposite in a way. We have the reputation of always being fighting and always arguing. But in this world, things are always veiled. Things oftentimes are the opposite of what they appear. So, we have the potential to bring great peace and to make disparate points of view see each other's point of view, and therefore it expresses itself as a arguing constantly, right? But the actual it's not really real. The actual talent that we have is really making peace, and that's actually one of the traits of a real Talmid Chacham is that they shalom ba'olam, they bring peace to the world. It would sometimes seem the opposite, but if you look at what we do when we're learning, and we're looking at opposing views all the time. We'll have one view that comes out really strong in the Talmud, and then all of a sudden, the next point of view comes out and it's the opposite, and you say, wow, well that point of view looks good too, and you end up learning how to see things from many different vantage points. And so therefore it makes sense that we should be the ones to bring peace to the world, because that's really basically what we're studying all the time. It's how to reconcile not only diametrically opposed views, but diametrically opposed views this way and this way and this way, and every different way in the Talmud, in our basic learning. So this ability to bring together comes from the great ability to bring together, which is comes from Yaakov Avinu, which is Bli Mitzarim. It's this connection to the infinite. Right? And so we're just saying how Yaakov Avinu, he falls asleep on Har Bayit, and then he has this dream, and that kind of represents the ability to even in the everyday, in the physical, in the very regularness of life, to find the spiritual, and that's on Shabbat. I mean, really, if you really think about it, you might go to some old Jew living in Jerusalem, and you'd look at him, and he's sitting there, and he and his wife, and they have like a couple of rolls, and like a little glass of wine and some fish, and you look at it, and they're making kiddush, and then they're washing, and they're singing, and having a great, and they're maybe they're elderly, and they're having like a great time. And you look at them like from a practical point of view, and you say these people are nuts. They've got like a little wine and some rolls, and they're so happy. Where's it coming from? And the answer is that when a person's in touch with the infinite, so they don't need very much. It's Esau says Yesh li Rav, and Yaakov Avinu says Yesh li Kol. I have everything. So Yaakov Avinu only needs just whatever he has, because he understands that God's presence is everywhere, and in everything. The infinite is in everything. So just a little bit. So on Shabbos, that light kind of shines into us. The most simple food and the most, just a simple conversation during the week, which wouldn't necessarily mean much to us. We have to really go overboard during the week. On Shabbos, even just a little bit, all of a sudden it's mind blowing. Or even if you like learning on Shabbos, is so different. You look at one Rashi, and it just kind of blows your mind. Whereas in the week you have to learn it's much more. And so Shabbat again is just bringing together, or bringing out really the infinite. It's not really bringing together because it's there all the time, I suppose. So that's kind of just not really an introduction, just kind of talking around some of the issues the Zohar brings here. Vayechi Yaakov eretz Mitzrayim 17 shana. Amar Rabbi Yossi, Lavochama b'nevuah b'Mitzrayim, Yeron b'noi b'kama galvan, ad hachava ad adna deketz Mashiach. So this is like this great light right before Yaakov left the world, this great light shined into Yaakov Avinu. I mean, it was always shining, I'm sure, but even in terms of us, in terms of the Jewish people. Right? So he started something, and before he left the world, he had an entire vision of what was going to happen to us. So you can imagine. He saw basically all the stages of Galut that we were going to have to go through. From Mitzrayim, from that time until Mashiach's coming. He saw everything. And specifically, he had this tremendous prophecy in Egypt, which is interesting. Zohar finds that fascinating. So, and basically it says that this specific type of prophecy, this is really, really interesting. This specific type of prophecy could not have happened except for in Egypt. So it's an interesting concept. There's the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Zitzal, and his memory be merit for us, said that actually prophecy didn't stop after the destruction of the temple, but in a certain sense it got more. Because when the temple was around, we had the temple. And so we had a place we could go, we had a place we could go and connect and kind of if we lost our way, we could re-find ourselves there. And so we had prophets, but it wasn't, they were minor, it wasn't necessarily as, we had the depth of the temple to go to. He says, whereas after the temple was destroyed, all we have is basically each other. And so we needed an even deeper level of prophecy to comfort us through Galut. And so it seems like, when I heard that idea first, and I thought, wow, that's really interesting. Like, where's it coming from? It seems like it's actually coming from this Zohar, which is that there's a certain level of prophecy that that could only be reached in Mitzrayim. And it seems kind of maybe like a little bit of a wild idea, but that's what the Zohar says. And such a level of prophecy that, again, Yaakov Avinu saw everything. From the Galut of Mitzrayim all the way to Mashiach's coming. And it was really the highest, the Zohar says, the highest prophecy. Lo itnbiu that really no other prophet achieved. What Yaakov Avinu achieved in this week's Parashat, in the Vayechi, no one else achieved. V'lo mata lahu shum inish min b'nei neviah elahu Moshe. The only and no other prophet from any of the prophets achieved this level, except for Yaakov Avinu and Moshe Rabbeinu. So Yaakov Avinu reaches this level of Vayechi, and the only other person in history to ever reach that level is Moshe Rabbeinu. But the Zohar points out an amazing thing here. But Moshe Ketiv, with Moshe it's written, Ki lo yirani ha'adam v'chai. Right, so with Moshe it's written, and a person cannot see me and live. Right, so Moshe Rabbeinu asked to see God's face, and God tells his answer is, you can't see me and live. Which doesn't. We also know that the Torah tells us that God spoke to Moshe face to face. So it doesn't mean that he didn't speak to him. It means that Moshe Rabbeinu had to mevatel a certain aspect of himself in order to see God in that way. Ki lo yirani ha'adam v'chai. So the Zohar makes a connection here between Vachai and Vayechi. The only difference is a Yud. Now, Yaakov Tiv, Vayechi Yaakov. Vayechi, Nevuata de Nachtam Aspaklaria de Nahara. This is a type of prophecy that comes from this shining window or space or whatever. So again, this kind of play on words between Vechai and Vayechi, and Ki lo yirani ha'adam v'chai comes at the end of the phrase, and Vayechi Yaakov is the very beginning, and so I think the concept here is that the difference, the prophecy was the same for Yaakov Avinu and Moshe Rabbeinu, which is incredible when you think about it. In either way, but. The difference being that, again, Yaakov Avinu was coming from Eretz Yisrael into Eretz Mitzrayim. So he was coming from this great place of this great expanse, this incredible this incredible vision into a place of constriction, into a place where from that point on, we would be like galut after galut, problem after problem, or cycle after cycle. And Moshe Rabbeinu was coming out of Mitzrayim, right? And so Moshe Rabbeinu, Vechai is it's at the end of the phrase, and Vayechi is at the beginning of the phrase. The one relating to Yaakov Avinu.
What was the prophecy again that you said Yaakov saw?
It says that he saw V'yamim Benoi B'kama Galvan. He says that he saw all the galuyot that the Jewish people would go through. Ad hacha v'ad ana the case Mashiach. From that point in history, from Mitzrayim until Mashiach's coming.
He had to carry it on himself, knowing that he's the beginning of all those galuyot.
Yeah, it's pretty heavy when you really think and actually it basically goes on to say, literally before he died, it totally broke his heart. Yaakov Avinu's heart was broken, from what he saw, that his children would have to go through. Which is, an interesting thing. So when Moshe Rabbeinu was coming out, again, I mean, you think about the description of what the prophecy of Moshe and what happened when Moshe Rabbeinu happened at Har Sinai, and it's awesome. I mean, it's very awesome, and so one of the most awesome events in human history, and then you think about Yaakov Avinu, and there are a lot of differences. Yaakov Avinu was just laying there. There was no fanfare. They didn't see the sounds or hear the sights, or there was no lightning or fire. He was just laying there. Whereas the prophecy was the same, but the way that we achieved it was different. So with Moshe Rabbeinu, the concept Kilo Yerani Ha'adam V'chai, Moshe Rabbeinu had to, because he's coming out of this place of tremendous tumah, this place of tremendous negativity. Egypt was like the headquarters for kind of negativity, really. And so he was coming out of that, so he had to mevatel, himself, in order to reach this level. Whereas Yaakov Avinu was coming from Eretz Yisrael, from this tremendous place of clarity and light, and so it was just kind of naturally how he was. And it's interesting to remember that Yaakov and Moshe had the same prophecy, or the same level of prophecy. It's a fascinating concept. And in a certain way, again, the way that Yaakov Avinu achieved it was somehow maybe greater. Well, the Gemara. The Gemara, sorry. It's a day when I'm so far without any coffee. But maybe that's all I'm doing here. Is I'm uplifting the spiritual energy of the coffee. Ba'il meimar nevuan de galusa de aran livnohi ba'ar de knan b'chol ara de itotav bah. That is to say, he had a prophecy of all the different lands, the galut, the exiles, that of all the different places the Jewish people would go. And this is where this is really interesting, including the galut of Canaan. It's another fascinating thing, and in every land that they would be in. Right, and me'ar de Mitzrayim hava tabir live. Diksiv ki yesh shever b'Mitzrayim. I guess I think saying here the most heartbreaking maybe was Mitzrayim, but Mitzrayim is in general is the general galut. It's like represents all the galut because it was like the worst. It had all the worst aspects of every single one. So it broke his heart. Interestingly enough, the concept here is that Galut is it's not necessarily a place, but it's a state of mind. Galut is a place inside, wherever until Mashiach's coming, wherever we are, it's Galut. So it's always Galut, because also the concept of Mashiach, the concept of the messianic state of mankind, is an internal one. It's a time where it's to do with an internal state of consciousness that manifests obviously in how we treat each other and in the way things go in the world, but it's not necessarily a place. It is a place, but it's a place internally as opposed to externally. So it's possible wherever we are, basically. I mean, some places are nicer than others, to be. Oh, excuse me. But wherever we happen to be, until Mashiach comes, it's Galut, right? So the concept is that it's like the previous Strukova Rebbe, as it's all said, like, our purpose in the world is to get rid of death. That's what we have the capability of doing as Jews. That's our potential. Our potential, he says, is to totally transform the reality of this world until spiritual and physical are completely united. There's no more death. So anything other than that is a compromise, basically. And so he says that we have to always keep in mind that, again, no matter where we are, until we've reached that place, until we've actually fixed the world in such a way, we're not there. There's no, it's not Mashiach time, right? Because that's what we can do. That's our potential, he says. So again, here it's not a matter of where we are physically. And again, this may be kind of controversial. It's not a matter of where we are physically. It's a matter of where we are spiritually. And honestly, I mean, that's really what the world, we need to fix the world. The world is tremendously broken, and there's a lot to be done, and just being one place or another doesn't solve the problems, So, and each one of us, again, we have, I think we talked about before, each one of us has, wherever we are, we're supposed to help fix those places. That's our, help elevate them. Yeah.
Are you saying fixes just in a, let's say, moral way of ben adam l'chavaro, or also in a way of ben adam l'mkom, where like you're becoming more connected to Judaism?
Yes.
Because if you look at Israel, where it's Israel, so you could say it's out of Galut, but more than half the country has nothing to do with, well, I don't know if more than half, but they have nothing to do with religion.
Right.
But they could be really, really good people.
For sure.
So then are they still in Galut because they have nothing to do with religion, or are they getting us closer by being good people? Or take someone who is religious but doing terrible things. And that's just Israel specific. Like, I agree with you that it doesn't have to be a physical place. It's more of like where you're at. But
well, I think there's a lot of things going on there. I think one of them is that, and it goes on to talk about this, the whole concept of how we see things. Mitzrayim, one of the primary ways that the Zohar talks about, one of the primary ways that Galut works on a person. Mitzrayim, Meitzar Yam, the constriction of the expanse, right? The constriction of the sea. That's Mitzrayim. So a definition of Galut is there's this all these incredible opportunities, and I'm only seeing this. I don't see any of it. So that's how Galut works. It tries to get us to fixate on externalities through our eyes, through what we see, and when we think what we're really seeing is really what's going on, right? And so you point out, an excellent point, which is, you look at sometimes quote-unquote religious people, and they look at, wow, it's really good, they're religious, and then maybe look sometimes how they act, and they don't seem so religious, and the opposite's true. Sometimes you look at people, they don't look very religious, so to speak, but the way they act is really nice.